Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of 100 Days of Code with me, Lilly Code. Very exciting stuff. We are already on day 40. It's just super. It's absolutely flying. I did the calculations and I'm going to finish up on the 28th of December, so right in time over the Christmas season. So we'll be doing this right up until December. Very exciting stuff, and we are already on day 40. So super duper, let's get into this. So what we're doing today is building a custom hook, which again, it's really exciting. I'm so excited to learn this. And what we're going to do first of all is just get our code ready. So I just need to start a new project and we'll get going on this. So chapter 15, okay. Chapter 15. Yes, I've been jumping all over the place. So we're on chapter 15 here. I will just move this into this YouTube folder. I'll rename it. So these are the files that came with the course that Max provided. So I will unzip that in here now, extract all, and then we can open it up, get it going. And I want this actually to be within my Max 100 Days folder because this is where I'm tracking it in Git. So in here, if we go into this folder, we can see I have Git, and here's all the different chapters we've been looking at so far. So super duper. I'll just rename this as well to 15 because it's just handier. And now we'll open this in code. Open with code, great. So we have our project, and what we're going to do is if we have a look at this code here, and I'll just explain what's going on. And I was looking back at the video yesterday, guys, still some delays, still some bugs to iron out really for the best viewing experience. So best believe I'll be working on that over the weekend. So this is the best possible experience it can be for everybody. So thanks very much for bearing with me. And you know, we're getting on great. So super exciting for me anyway. So we'll open up the terminal here and I'll just show you these files. So we have a forward counter here. And all the forward counter does, it's using state. And with the state at an interval of 1,000 milliseconds, which is just a second, we are using this effect. So you can use effect and then pass in a time. So the effect that's happening, what's getting triggered here, is that it's setting the counter to the previous counter add 1. So we're just incrementing every single second. And then for the backwards counter, we're doing a very similar functionality here for the backwards counter, and we're doing the opposite. We're just minusing 1 on every 100,000 on every 1,000 milliseconds, which is just a second. So with that being said, this is a perfect example of where you would want to create your own hook, because when you're creating a hook, what you're doing is extracting out very common code, and in a larger application, you know, this could be seen in a lot of different places. Hooks are very useful. So we're going to learn how to build our own now, like this use state hook or this use effect hook. We're going to create our own hook, and you can do this in React. So that's what we're about to get started on. So the first thing we're going to do now is create a new file. And first of all, actually, I'll just run an npm install. And then we'll get going. So let's just do ls, cd code, and then cd01 into the starting project. So perfect. And I'll just do npm install to install all the packages from our package.json and allow this project to be runnable, because it will be looking for these packages. And then we do npm start to fire it up. So yeah, great. So I'm just watching the video here while our npm is installing and getting up to scratch on exactly how we're going to do this. But I'm very excited for this. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so what we're going to do first of all is create a new folder side by side with our components folder. So in order to get it side by side with this folder, we created in our source folder. So new folder, and we'll call this hooks. Excuse me, thought I was going to hiccup. Anyway, so that was unnecessarily said. So in hooks here now, we will create a new file called usecounter.js. That was a folder, so I'll just delete that. Or is it just because I misnamed it? Rename. Yes. Cool. So now we'll just set this up as we have done. So he's saying lots of things here, so okay. Yes, okay, so it has to start with use, which makes perfect sense. That's a hard rule. All the hooks in React do start with use. So this gives React the guarantee that you will use this function with respect to how hooks should be used. So we call it use to indicate it is indeed a hook and that it's going to be used in a certain manner, like a hook, because it starts with use. So super. Okay, yeah, so by declaring with the use keyword first, it's going to actually tell us if we use it in a way that we shouldn't be using it. We'll be informed of that. So this is going to give us hints as well if we use this incorrectly by accident. So that's great. And this is just an arrow function as always. And then we'll export it as always as well. So export use counter default use counter, and that's all we need to do there. And then all we're going to do is copy over our code from our forward counter, which is in here. So if we go into our forward counter and we copy everything within this function, the function that we were initially calling forward counter, which is very similar to backwards counter, apart from this small piece plus and decrement, so this can be extrapolated into its own hook, we will copy all of this. So we'll leave that final return statement. We want this code here. So let's cut and stick this into our use counter function. And now all we need to do is just import the various imports that we need. So we're using use state and we're using use effect, and as we know, these just get imported straight from React. So let's do that. We will say import use state, and this should be in a parentheses, curly parentheses. Oh shoot, like so. Oh no. And comma, so we'll just put use effect in here as well, comma, and then from React. So none of this is new, hopefully, but if it is, don't worry, you know, we'll just keep on looking, keep on learning. There's no race to the finish line. We're learning every day. So now we will just run npm audit fix, and then we'll just fire this up and we will continue to set up our file here. Okay, cool. Cool. So how do we use these custom hooks? So this is a custom hook now we've created called use counter, and the way we use this is the exact same way that we use the other hooks. We just import it and we use it in the very same way. So let's do that. Excuse-moi. So in the forward counter here, we can just import use counter, and we don't need this stuff anymore because this is being used elsewhere. So let's just hijack this and say import use counter, and it's done the import for us, and then we can use that. So first of all, we need to set it up like we have done for all of our other states. So we'll say const. Well, first of all, we'll just say use counter. Yeah. And then we need to set up our state. So we'll say, sorry, he's just jumping about a bit, so I have to wait till he goes back. Okay. Yeah. So I'll just get this running while I'm listening to the explanation. npm start. So we want to make the counter state available within this. Okay. Cool. So one of the first things we need to do is back in our, I'll just stick this here. This is our, no problem, we'll fix that. So back in our forward counter, use counter, we need to return something here. So what we need to return is our counter. We want this counter to be the thing that's emitted. You could emit anything you want from your own custom hook, but for this we want the counter. So there we go. We'll just return that, press save. Forward counter line 10. Oh yes, of course, because we're still editing our forward counter, so that's perfect. And then back in the forward counter, we can actually declare and use it. So yeah, we'll say const counter equals use counter. And is that all we need? Stop the lights. Oh my God, it is. Look at that. So handy. And then to think that we can reuse that piece of code for positive and negative. So, oh my God, it's, oh yeah, because we still didn't extract out the other code. So the other code is still running as it should for the negative counter. But that's great. Look at this. Woo! We have a counter. So we will continue to use this now to be able to be used across multiple components. You have to start with use. Yes, when you are calling your own counter, you must start with use, which makes perfect sense. That's not hard to remember because all of the hooks start with use. So that's actually a great way to visually see if something is a hook or not as well, which also seems obvious, but until you sort of think about some things, sometimes that's when it sort of goes ping, okay, anything with use is a hook. So now we have had our light bulb moment and we can move on. Great. Yes. So now what we want to do is make our use counter configurable so we can use it across multiple components. So that's what we're going to do. So what we do in order to do this is we pass something into this function. And then we can reuse it. Oh, that seemed important. So I'm just going to listen to that again and relay. So use state accepts a parameter, which has the initial state. We have our dependencies array going in as a second argument. And we can pass something into this function as well. So we're going to pass in something that's going to tell it how this counter should be updated. So we will say counter update function. And then okay, or rather than making it as flexible as having a function, which we could do, and then what we would do is down here, we would pass in the counter update function, yes, in the set counter, like this. And that would enable us to run a function when we were to set the counter. But if we don't want to make it that, mad, we can pass in a Boolean, so just an on and off flag as well. You can pass in whatever you like, really. A string, you can pass in a number, a function, or a Boolean. So we'll pass in a parameter called forwards. And sorry, just had an itchy face. And then what we're going to do is once we come in here into our const interval, and we're running our function, what we want to do is say if forwards. So this is just going to be an on and off switch. So we're going to have if forwards and if backwards. Just make sure nothing happens to the mic. That was a disaster yesterday. What am I supposed to do? So then we have if forwards in here. Yep. And this is going to be in the case that we've passed in increment. We will open up our brackets here and say set the counter. Ooh, that's not what I want. Set counter to previous counter. And then an arrow function and previous counter dot one, which is just what we were doing before. So nothing has really changed. We're just making this a bit more dynamic. And then we're going to say else, open our brackets, set the counter. I'll just copy this one. Yep. And get rid of this line because this was from previously what we were running in this function, but we're putting it into an if else now. So we have two states to take care of, and we can see that down in our application. It's telling us it's not a number, which is totally fine because we can expect that we're still setting this up. So what we'll do down here is just say previous counter is previous counter minus 1. So we'll add a minus symbol here. Perfect. And we also want to give it a state coming in to begin with. So we will say use counter if forwards equals true. Okay. So we're actually setting this boolean, passing it in, and setting it to true. So then how is it going to get set to false? But we'll figure that out. Okay. Max, you know I trust you immensely, so let's go. You never steer me wrong. Max is just like, oh, all right. No, he's lovely. He actually takes compliments so well. I've passed on the information of how great he is a few times. So now our dependency is forwards. We are dependent on this boolean forwards to run this custom hook. So we'll let it know this is the dependencies array. So that's what we're dependent on. Oh, yes. Yeah, okay. Okay, perfecto, selecto. So, now we're going to just implement this in the backwards counter as well. So perfect. So in our backwards counter here, we're just going to do the same. We're going to import it and put it to good use. So let's go. So we'll say import our use counter. And it does the automatic import for us. And then we're just going to set it up as we have already. So we'll pass use counter. And we want to pass it in false now because we are not going forward. We want to go backwards. So yeah, we just better extract our counter as well and add this to a variable that we're defining. So counter, const counter is equal to use counter, which we're passing in as false. Perfect. Okay. Amazing. And now we can get rid of all this other logic that was doing our initial counting process first. This is all we need, like so handy. I'm actually loving these hooks. So now we save. Loving them until you get an error. But no, I'm joking. They are really great. So let's have a look and see what's gone wrong here. So identifier counter has already been declared. Okay, line 7 of which file our backwards counter.js. So line 7, ain't nothing going on line 7. So I'll just save that again. that was just an error. Perfect. So it was before I had deleted that. So there we go. Look, our counters are counting away. And this is just a simple implementation to see how something like this would actually work. So brilliant. I feel more confident in making my own hooks. I hope you do too. And now we're going to implement this in a more real world situation or scenario to see a bit more complex how this is going to actually work in real life. But that was just to get a taster. And my taste buds are feeling stimulated. So great, let's move on in the code and in my terrible joke. So perfect. Cool. Great. So now we're going to look at a bit of a more realistic project, which means I just have to check where is he doing this, because so this is still within 15. Oh yes, okay, so we just need to go into our same folder. Great, we don't need to go any crazy. So here we go, onwards to a more realistic function. Bada bing, bada boom, ready to go. So we'll just close all of our files here. You just right click, and so right click and then go down to close all in Visual Studio Code, your IDE, your code editor. Open up your terminal, which Ctrl Shift. Oh look. I won't mess about. I just thought I knew the shortcut and then it didn't work, so I was a bit confused. So we'll CD into the code folder, and then let's just do an ls. And now we want to go into CD into 04, building a more realistic, onwards to a more realistic example. So perfect. Again, we need to do an npm install in here. This is a different project with a different package.json. And as you can see in here, we don't yet have our node modules folder. In our starting project, you can see our node modules. So we're just building out that node modules folder by running that command npm install. So that's running away there. And I'm just going to watch a little bit of the video and listen to what he's saying. Cool. So what we're going to do now is go to Firebase for this. So that's awesome. So we will just open up our Firebase again. Firebase. Here we go. And we set this up like 2 videos ago, I think. So it would have been day 38 or 37, but it's all linked in the description and in the title. It'll say Firebase in the title. So you can go and have a look at that. And so far we have some movies in here, but we're going to refactor this database now and use it for this current project. So okay. So we'll go into our apps.js folder and get our URL set for our database. So I'll just copy this, go into our app.js of our 04 folder here, and we see this fetch link, and we want to keep its /tasks.json. I had a problem with this in a previous lecture because I didn't add a /. I was just giving the Firebase URL, which you can find once you set up your Firebase application and you set it to a test application, so you can read and write easily to it. We can see here we have read and write set, and that just allows us to interact with this database under the test mode, which we didn't have to set that up ourselves. And then we're going to do a /tasks.json, which will create this folder rather than the movies folder. We'll create a tasks folder within this database. So I'll also just run npm start. I actually don't mind about the vulnerabilities. So up here it was saying you have some warnings. We have 27 vulnerabilities. Use npm audit fix. So I mean, I should really run npm audit fix, but if it's going to fire up, let's just power ahead, delete our old running instance because we don't need that anymore. And who knows? I think it's going to fire up. I'm confident. Yay. So now we see just a task addition application. Sorry, I'm intermittent fasting at the moment, so I'm a bit don't know. Sure, I'm grand. Perfect. Do you know, my digestive system needed a break. So now we're just going to send some API requests to this database and also set up our own hooks as well, which is really exciting. So okay, great. So we can see here in this component, we have this fetch tasks, which is an asynchronous function, which means it's going to our database and we're setting it up in an asynchronous way so we can await our response coming back. So we can try here. This is just a fail safe. So you can try and then catch, which will tell you if you have an error. But in here we have our async function, which we're then awaiting on the results. So similar to a promise, but a nicer setup, an ES6 way to do promises. And we can see then down here we're assigning that to data. And this particular function, fetch tasks, is being called on use effect, which is when the component changes, but it's also being called on the click of a button. Yeah, on the click of a button. So tasks, So if we go into our components here and we go into tasks and task.js, here we can see it's being called on the click of a button. So here we have our button on click, run the props.onFetch method. So super, that should all be, I don't see the try again button. We must need to put that component in here. Or when we have a task, the button will be part of the task, I presume. So, because at the moment we have no tasks found, and what we're looking at now is tasks.js. So once we add a task, maybe if this is working, okay, so we don't have a fully set up yet. That's perfectly fine. I wasn't expecting mountains to move before we've even done anything. So we'll just continue on here. And I'll just move this over because, oh, why not? And let's go. Okay guys, I was a bit chilly, so I just stuck on some clothes. So let's continue here. So what we're doing at the moment is going to make our custom hook now. So we're within our folder number 4, and we just want to set up our hooks folder as we did previously. So we'll create a new folder here and call it hooks. And then we will create a new file within here, and it's going to be a HTTP hook in order to communicate with our server. So we will say use http.js. Perfecto selecto. And now we'll just set this up. So, sorry, just moving my footstool about the place. So here we will just say use http, and this should be a constant, and it's going to be an arrow function, which we're going to export. So we just do function, well, this should be equal function, arrow function, open and close our curly parentheses. This should be an equal sign, hopefully. I was going to say obviously, but nothing is obvious until you learn it. So if it wasn't obvious, don't worry. And then we'll export default and call it use HTTP as we have called it above. So now we can use this elsewhere, and then we're going to set it up. Sorry. Cool. Okay. So what we want to do is export all of the code where we are getting our response, sending away our response, and also the states. So what did he just grab? Okay, so we want to grab the entire fetch tasks function. So there you have this little collapse button here, which makes this easy to say exactly what code is contained within the brackets itself. So for example here, if I was to use this little arrow and collapse it, we can see that this is where that try block is now. We can see the opening and the closing parentheses. So if we just use this arrow to collapse the whole function, there we go. We see our whole function there, and we also want these constants. So we'll cut all of this like so and go into our use HTTP function and paste that in here, or our hook, our function hook. It's a hook. That's a function. So I'll just expand that again, and now we're going to have to import all of these different things that we've used. So I'll just do import use state, because we can see here we've called use state. We also have use state is called a few times there. We also have, let's just have a quick look. That's it. Okay. So now we'll just do a comma and import this from React and add our semicolon. So great. And now let's continue. Okay, and we'll also just rename this function within our use HTTP function. Rather than saying fetch tasks, just call this send request, because it's a bit more generic. So send request is what we're going to call this function. Yeah. So we don't want to just keep it to fetching data. We're going to, well, the fetch you can pass in different things, but we're going to make it more generic. So we can use this across the place, across of our application, in different locations, and do HTTP functionality for us. That's why we're setting up this hook. Cool. Cool. Yeah, so we just need to pass in some parameters as well to make this configurable. Of course. So yeah, we're going to pass in a request config, which is just the configuration of our request, which we will pass in things like the URL. So here, rather than passing in this URL, I'll actually just comment this out because I'm going to need it somewhere else now in a moment. I will instead pass in request config.url. So we'll set this up .url, and this is going to be, okay, let's see what he's just saying here. Okay, so we make sure that we pass in something with a URL property on it. Yeah. And we also pass our object in. So we'll pass method, which is going to be request config dot method, our headers. Request config dot headers. And then we'll also have body, which is going to be stringified. So we'll do JSON.stringify and pass in the brackets, which just turns this into a JSON string, and then we pass in our request config.body. So this is just doing a bit of parsing on that body before we get it back. And then and then down here, we also want to configure this to be a bit more generic too. So instead of executing this code here, we're going to pass in another parameter and run that instead. So actually we want to keep our data coming back in a response.json format. So we'll await the data and we will convert it to a JSON when we get back that response, when we finally have awaited and we've got the response. We're going to assign that to data, and we'll also just pass in up here beside our request config, we want to pass in another parameter, which we're going to call apply data. Apply data. So now what we can do is use this down below. Should that have been a function? No. Okay. And then down here, what we're going to do is use this and pass it in data. Cool. Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, so we're going to pass in these things from our component when we call this use HTTP when we use it. So we'll see that in action in a moment. And we need to return something, back to the component where we are calling this custom hook. So this is what will be sent back once we've called this hook. So we're going to return an object, and we'll have is loading, and we just want the is loading state to be returned there. And we just want to pass the error back as well in case something has gone wrong. And the send request, which points at send request. And because we just have the same things defined and passed, rather than actually saying is loading, error is error, send request is send request, you can pass these in singularly because JavaScript knows what's going down around the town. So we can just say this like this. It's the same thing because they were equal. So perfect. And now we have our custom hook ready to put it into action and see what happens. So let's see. Cool. Perfect. So yeah, now we're going to use it, and we're going to use it in our app.js because this is where we cut all that code from. So this is where we want to replace it. So first of all, we're going to import custom hook. Well, it was called use HTTP from hooks use HTTP, and now we can use this. So we just say use hook, use HTTP, excusez-moi, and assign this to a constant. So the tasks, this from the use HTTP, the tasks should actually be over in our app.js. So first of all, we have our use tasks to manage the state of the tasks within this component. Then we're going to use our custom hook, and we need to pass in the parameters we're expecting to see. So we need our request config, which is going to be a URL. And we want this. And we also are expecting methods, header and body. But because this is going to be a fetch request, we don't need those. You only need those for other types of requests. Perfect. Cool. So I'll just pass the URL in here first of all, and then I'll go back and explain what was going on there. So I think maybe I should just declare a constant here. Let's see if this will work. So const, don't see why this wouldn't work. Const URL is equal to this string, and then we just pass in URL instead. URL is going to be equal to URL down here. Oi. Right, so we'll figure that out. Okay, there we go. So perfect. And we also still need to like flesh this out a bit. But as I was saying, when we go back to our use HTTP here, we can see that our request config that we're passing in is expecting more than just a URL. We also need method, headers, and body. But what we can do in the case, because when it's a GET request, you don't need these things. So we can tell it in here that so therefore you don't need to keep passing in GET every time you want to use it. You can specify it in here. So what we do is do a ternary operator, which says, if we don't have this, then make it something. And in the other case, if it's true or false, do one thing or do the other. So we'll say request config dot method, and then we have a dot dot, which is our ternary. And then in the case that we don't have a method, we're going to make it get. So it's just going to default to a get. And the same thing is going to happen to the others. And if we do not have, this should be headers obviously. If we do not have headers, then we want to just pass in an empty object. So here we will just pass an object like this. And then for the body down here, what we want to do is again a ternary. So we have our question mark, and then we say, okay, so this is in the case that we have something. So what we're going to put here, we put something ahead of it and we say request config dot body. If we have one of those, then we want to JStringify the request dot body. And if we don't have one, in the no case, we'll just pass in null. So perfecto. Yeah. Okay. Of course. So what we actually want to do, rather than having to do this is expecting an object. So we need to pass in an object. So that's what we will do. And we still need our second argument, the apply data. Yeah. So here we'll just define another constant called transform tasks. And what this is going to be is another arrow function, and we're going to take in our tasks object. And this is going to be an arrow function which takes in task objects, and then we copy and paste this code. I don't have the code because I already got rid of it. So I'll just retype it. So in here we have declared a constant loaded tasks. Let's just make sure I did indeed get rid of it. I did. I got rid of it from down here. Yeah, so that's okay. We won't hang around. So const loaded tasks, we're just going to equal this to an empty array. We've defined an empty array here called loaded tasks. Then we're going to loop over. So we do for const, we declare the key, the name of the individual item for each iteration of the loop. So that's what we're doing here with this const task key. This is one individual item in that array. And then we say in data. So we're looking at our data. Or in the data object, I should say. It's not in the loaded tasks array. So then what we're going to do in here is say loaded tasks. So now we're populating this empty array. Dot push, and what we're going to pass in is an object with an ID property, and we will call this task key. Some text, which is the data at the task key. So for the individual item, so this is going into the data at that particular item, and then what we want to do is get the text. So get the text property from the task key that we're currently iterating on. Perfect. And we should actually be looping the task objects that we've passed in to this, not the data. Okay, so yes, data is wrong everywhere there, obviously, because we don't have access to data anymore. We were looping over the wrong thing. So this should be tasks object. So we're passing in task objects into this function. That's what's happening here. This could be in parentheses if that makes it easier to read. It's the same as all of our other functions calls that we've been doing. So if we were to pass in something here, it's the same. And then this is just being declared with the function keyword, and this is an arrow function declaration. So they're doing the exact same thing. So then we have declared our empty array in here, and then we're looping over each of the things that we've passed in, our tasks object, which will contain all of our tasks. And for each iteration, we're calling that a task key, and then we're populating this empty array by pulling out information from the specific task, and this is the information that we want to populate, ID and text. So within our loaded tasks, we will have tasks which have properties of ID and text. So great. Perfect. And now this transform task function is what can be passed in to this object. So what doesn't it like there? Okay, so this URL should be passed. Okay, so now I think I just need URL, comma, and this thing. Why am I getting an error? Comma. Okay, so what Max has done. Well, first of all, he hasn't called this const, so there we go. Okay, so I didn't need to call it constant because we're actually just calling an instance of this hook now, or a function. So, and what the function is expecting is a URL and a transform tasks, and up here I've assigned the URL to this particular string, and down here our transform tasks is the function that's going to do something with these tasks. So perfect. Yep. And use HTTP is going to return this data back to us, so then we can do something with this data. Okay, so that was all I was missing actually. So he has assigned this to a constant now. So we've done constant HTTP data is equal to use HTTP. So I was just missing the equals and then declaring I want to use HTTP. I should have finished assigning it. I hadn't properly assigned it. That was the problem. And now we're going to get something back from this. So we can say const object is equal to our HTTP data. Yeah, and we can pull out the various things that we need here. So we want our is loading, error, and our send request. Yeah. Okay. And what we can do with this send request is we give it a name. So we'll do ... and say fetch tasks, because that's what we're going to do in this particular instance of using this hook. So then now what we can do is, yeah, we've renamed it here. Okay, and then he said we can just delete our old fetch task function, which I've already done. I don't see it there, so I've already got rid of that. That's okay. And we keep our use effect where we're going to call fetch task, because this means every time the component is loaded, we should still run this function. So, okay. And we just need to add it as a dependency because we're now relying on that from somewhere else. Okay, so he actually said that by adding this here now we'll create an infinite loop. So we don't actually want to add it as a dependency just yet. but we will add it as a dependency in a better way later on, in a way that will not cause an infinite loop. And now what you being so slow for, eh? So this is just reloading. I'll open up my dev tools. We might have some stuff going on in there, but we'll find out. So it's just reloading. Give it a little moment. Good time to rehydrate. Why is this taking so long? Okay, there we go. So I was just going to start closing things, but we won't worry because it's loaded. So now let's try to add a task. Here's our tasks. Cool. React use effect has a missing dependency, fetch tasks. Okay. Included or remove the dependency array. Cool. So can I literally just remove this then, if that's a better approach? Yes, that's what the warning told us. So here it was saying on line 26, which is the line that we were just on there. Line 26, React hook use effect has a missing dependency, fetch task. So it actually knows, it's telling us either include it or remove it from the dependency array. So I've just removed the dependency array, either include it or remove the dependency array. So let's reload now. Why is this going so crazy? Crazy for feeling so lonely. That is crazy. Don't be crazy. You've got a friend in me. You've got a friend in me. Oh, great. Yes, so there's some mad stuff going on. That's okay. So on line 6 of our hook here, we have a warning. So our warning is saying tasks is assigned, but a value is never used. Line 6, that's gone now. So what you messing about? We'll just save. We'll do a hard refresh because that warning is not valid. And it did reload already, so I just wanted to see what might happen, you know. Okay. So I'm just closing that for a moment because it was sort of jumping around going crazy. I'm going to figure this out, what's going on. So that's what we're doing. Okay, so the way to properly now assign our dependencies within our use effect here, and to avoid this becoming an infinite loop, is to use callback. So here we can say fetch tasks. We can pass that in now. I just won't save because currently this would cause an infinite loop. But back in our use HTTP in our custom hook, in here we can wrap everything in use callback, and that will stop an infinite loop from happening. So not here. Before the async, so we'll say use callback. I'll just type it out because that was going to go crazy. And then down here we need our parentheses that we've just opened. And that should be before our return statement. I mean after our return statement, because our return statement is still part of this code. Down here, wrong place again. Let's check it out. What? So here's our... Okay, so that's the component declaration. Then we have our use callback, which is ending on a blue. Okay, so it should be before our return statement. Apologies. So it should be up here. And then, oh yeah, because that's a constant function within our greater function. So we're then returning something after we've done that. And this should be after our curly parentheses. Yes, okay, perfect. Cool. And then we just need to import it. So use callback is a inbuilt React hook because it starts with use. For God's sake, what is that extension? Because I don't want it. I really don't want it. Okay, so I'll just go and actually uninstall that. So you can see if you've installed some extension that you don't want anymore. I was going to use crude language there. But if you've installed an extension you don't want, you can uninstall it. So just come to your extensions. And we have something that's auto-completing here for us. So it looks like this, our Es7 React Snippets. And actually, it's all well and good and it's very, very helpful having snippets. But really when you're learning, I find it's far better to type these things out. You know, you're not going to get too much memory retention if you are constantly using things to just shortcut all your code. I mean, you will get used to it actually, you know, however it suits you actually, because you're learning no matter what you're doing. So just keep on learning, and however you find it most best for you to sit down and do the time, do it however you want. But personally, typing it out, you're going to retain more of it quicker because you're just practicing it more and thinking about it a little more than getting it to autocomplete. So we're passing in our request config and then our apply data, which is a function. And in our app component, we also want to import use callback. And use this as well. So our transform tasks is also going to be wrapped in a use callback. And this is ending after our parentheses, so it should end here. Yes. Okay, so something else we can do as well, which makes perfect sense, is here in our hook, in our use HTTP hook, we're using this request config, but we can see that where we're using this request config is actually further down the chain. We're using it within this particular function here. And I'll just move this parentheses up because that's a bit confusing. It's ending on this line here. Where's this one coming from? Oh yeah. Okay, perfect. So this should actually be indented and then this should be dropped down just to keep our eyes visually able to understand what's going on here. This block is all together and this block is all together. So perfect. And now what we're going to do is, rather than passing in our task text here and using our task text, which we're not even using that, what we can do is pass in our request config because we're using that further down. So if we move that from the actual hook definition and parameters and pass it in down into this particular function instead, which is our callback asynchronous function happening within our hook, then we can remove this from the dependencies. I didn't have any dependencies anyway, so I should have some dependencies here. Yeah. Okay, so my dependency should be down here, but I just want to check and make sure I'm not going to put them in the wrong place. Yeah, so instead we're going to put it in here. Okay, perfect. So after I set as standalone, yeah, so here, this is where I thought I should add it. So we do a comma, we pass in our dependencies array, and rather than passing in the request config, because we don't need that as a dependency anymore, we'll pass our apply data. And this shouldn't have actually broke it, to be honest. This shouldn't have been the thing that was breaking that. So something else was still breaking our code. So let's just open up our terminal here and have another look at our running code. So I'm just looking for a link to click because I'm lazy, but I don't have one. So let's just open up our browser and go to localhost and check out what's going on here. So enter. Let's hope I didn't okay, I did. I must have changed the location where it was coming out. So let's just run that again. This should be on 3000 now because we don't have anything else running. It opened in another one last time, I think. So we'll just let this fire up. And now, because we're passing in the URL in our app.js here, we don't need the URL anymore because we're going to pass that in a different way. We're not expecting that URL to come in anymore like that. We want just our function that we're going to run. So instead we can pass our URL somewhere else. So then what we can do instead is when we're calling our fetch tasks function down here, this is where we can pass in the URL. So we just pass in an object and we'll say URL, and it's doing that checking. If we only have a URL, then that's okay. We only have to pass in a URL. So I'll save that. I will reload. Something mad is still happening, but that's okay. Okay, so it's still doing that. That's okay. Let's just put in task. See what happens. Request failed. Cool, no problem. So we'll continue with this tomorrow and check out what's going on with these errors and continue to build out our custom hook. React hook use callback does nothing with only one argument. Thank you very much. So still going to call it a day. I've got a movie to watch with my dad and I'm really looking forward to it. We watched The Outlaw Josie Wales last night and it was brilliant, and it's Friday and I'm just looking forward to watching another movie or half of a movie. Don't have time to watch a full movie, so we'll watch half of it and chilling, getting my butt to bed. So that's my plan. So I hope you have an absolutely wonderful weekend, guys. Thanks so much for joining me, Lilly Code, on another episode. And if you do like my content, please do like and subscribe. It means the absolute world to me. So thanks so much, guys, and have a wonderful day. Yours truly, Lilly Code.